Morning. Wednesday, Margaret.
Morning. Morning.
Can I ask you a question? Do you know what it feels like to be caught in impossible choices? Impossible circumstances that might be so overwhelming that there are three choices like disaster. And when that happens, you know, are you afraid that you can't trust your hope? You can't trust where hope is being offered. I'm wondering about that this morning because I'm thinking about our readings and where there are these two men faced with impossible circumstances. But they made completely different choices. One went for the security and got instruction, but the other one went for the irrationality and found Emmanuel, God with us. These choices show us something crucial, that we either see the false security out of fear or trust God's impossible truth. But not an easy thing to do. The first God we heard about in the reading was King Ahaz. And Ahaz, his name means to seize, or Buddhist scripture would call it to grasp easily, yet not able to let go. And they tell you everything you need to know about Ahaz. As a king, he was trapped between two empires, coming from the south and from the north, rock the hard place with God. He can't leave or free or help with people. And God shows up in the form of a prophet and says, ask me anything. Anything to help me that you trust. Ask for anything and seek a shield or high heaven. Test me. Try me, God. See if divine power is enough to help you neighbor. My mic is not on.
But we're going to trust in God's an avenger. Impossible and improbable things come like a prophet Isaiah who comes to nudge and nudge the doubtful. Take a chance. Make a test. What will it take for you to open your hand and extend and accept the love? Ahaz could not do it. And in the end, his empire actually got destroyed. He picked a side. He picked the bigger of two bullies. It didn't work out. His part of Judea was destroyed. And, well, there was a lesson that Isaiah kept promoting. This is an example of what happens when you can't trust what God has set out for you. Not be afraid. Look for love. But then there's this other story, one we probably have heard before, about Joseph. Another person faced with impossible choices. Do you take Mary as your wife? Do you face the shame and social ruin, public humiliation? I'm sure he thought, well, this is also a choice I just can't make. But then what Joseph does, and I like this strategy, is he went to sleep. He took a little nap and hoped to wake up a little clear-headed. But in that dream, God came to him and made him an offer. Take this extended hand, wake up, and don't be afraid, Joseph. For whatever reason, Joseph chose to receive the help of God, to trust rather than to control. There are Josephs all around us, giving us a little glimpse of the kingdom of God in unlikely and illogical places. I met a Joseph the other week. I met a Joseph during a DC Anacostia Peace March. We were walking around a little church in deep southeast Anacostia with signs that said, "Put the guns away, let the children play." It rhymed. But beside me, my chanting partner was Mr. Don Ye. Now, Danye looked like he was auditioning for a cast in The Wire. Danye had straight up old school big chains, the black Air Force Ones, the hat with the wide brim. I looked at Danye and I thought, this brother looks scary. He was chanting with a lot of vim, a lot of vigor, but I noticed that as we marched, his face was covered in lines of passion that weren't about being scary, they were about being loving. There was something wise about him, and we started talking between our chants. And he said, I just love my boys. I started out on the streets and ended up going to jail, in prison. But when I was there, I was having a dream one night. Somebody woke me up and said, you should take up the free psychology class. And he did. So while he was in jail, he learned about systems theory and genograms and triangles and cutoff and all of our psychological tools that equipped him. So when he got out of jail, what Danye did was went back to his old neighborhood and started the Peacekeepers. Men who took younger boys who were on that verge of taking a gun to solve a problem and mentored them to get off the streets. And Danye's nonprofit got so popular, they have branches all over DC, offices. The city government invests in them. Danye's strategy is so popular, they were putting themselves out of business in the Bellevue neighborhood. They had to close down. There were so few guys on the streets. I asked Danye, well, how did you do it? How did you start to go out and help these young guys that you call knuckleheads, who call you Unc, and to convince them of some other way of taking a hand, of trusting in community love? He looked at me and laughed, and he said, well, it all starts with breakfast. Breakfast. He says, I show up at a house, I train my guys at 7 a.m. We show up at some apartment in Southeast or Northeast DC. Before a kid gets up, we knock on the door, and there's usually a desperate mama who opens the door wrapped in a robe, hair still wrapped up, and asks him, Mr. Don, you want some cereal? He says, I sit down at the table every morning, chip bowl, I ask for Frosted Flakes, if they have the Frosted Flakes. And we wait for a teenager to come shuffling out of the bedroom, bleary-eyed and cranky, acting bigger and badder than he knows how to be. And Danye says every time, I'm here because of you, because this was your dream to save you. And this is your program. So are you going to come with me, or are you going to sit here and complain? And he says what they usually say is, Unc, okay. And he walks into school, or he walks into their job, and they do it morning after morning. So successful that they've had to close down the Bellevue office branch of this program. I thought about Danye responding to a dream and waking up when young teenagers are just wiping the sleep out of their eyes from their own dreams. And I thought, that's a Joseph-like moment. Choosing again and again when it really doesn't make sense. Those Joseph moments are everywhere. Last Saturday was the biggest coat drive Saturday in the Episcopal Diocese of Washington. Did y'all have one here? There was an ECW coat drive, a Southeast coat drive, a Far North coat drive, and the one in Anacostia between a closed church, St. Philip's, and a community center. We were shuffling 500 donated coats. But when you get 500 donated coats, you get a lot of volunteers who park illegally. So while we were feeling good and passing out coats, I had a Joseph encounter, one that I probably wouldn't know what to do with if I hadn't been serving toast out of Charlie's Place for so many years. The parking enforcer officer, his name was Darius, and he looked around at the folks standing in line, getting their coats. They also got some hot chocolate. The kids were smeared with chocolate and running every which way. And he turned to me and said, "You're religious. What do you think about all this? This charity, giving to people, when other folks are having a hard time. What do you think?" I looked at him and I said, "Well, you grew up here, didn't you? He said, yeah. I said, well, what I know is you give until you can't. You give without asking. If you've got to ask, don't worry about giving because you're working on something else. And he nodded. That's nice. That's a nice way to think about it. I'm not used to people embracing the idea of loving others. I thought, well, that's interesting. Where did you get that idea from, Mr. Darius? And he said, well, I used to be homeless. I looked at him in his uniform. He had every marking of an official officer. He's a father. He's married. He goes, but I spent years struggling with drugs, sleeping in laundromats. He looked around and goes, where did the laundromats go? I had good dreams in laundromats because they were warm. It smelled like detergent. The lights were keeping me safe. Laundromats gave me a sense of safety, but they blocked my scary dreams. I thought, wow, that's an incredible story. But then what happened? He goes, well, one night I had such a hard time kicking the addiction. I would walk the streets and go to my mom's house and my aunt's house and holler up at their windows. They were so sick of me. They said, don't do that anymore, Darius. But one night I woke up from a dream, walked down the street to my aunt's window and started hollering again. I woke her up as well. She turned on the lights. She opened the window and not the door, looked down and said, your mom told me if you ever came here waking me from my sleep again, I was to give you this piece of paper. It was crumpled up and it had the number of a shelter with a program. And Darius said, well, here's the thing. I had tried shelters before. First time I tried, I did it because my mom didn't take. Second time I tried, I did it from a girlfriend. Didn't take. But the third time, something moved within me. Something reminded me of a dream I had where I wanted to do it for myself. He took the number, and then the next night, he slept in a bed for the first time in 2 years. And then the next night, and the next night, and then a week of nights, and finally, a year later, he was still sleeping in a program that helped him get clean. And 2 years later, he had finished his GED. And here he is today, the parking enforcer officer, who I noticed was delaying his conversation with me to prevent giving folks a ticket that they couldn't afford. I thought, you are Joseph. You're Joseph who made weird choices against your own will. Time and time again. Josephs are everywhere. Josephs can be people or programs. Josephs can be churches. I dare say, and I'm not trying to boost your St. Margaret's sense of ego, but this is a Joseph church. Because if you go generations being the first or only church that lets folks get buried with dignity during the AIDS crisis, or lets same-sex couples get married, you're a Joseph church, making decisions that seem illogical to the broader church or the diocese, to wake up from a dream and take the risk, to not be afraid, to know that love is coming in some strange form. It's illogical, but that's the Joseph movement, the Joseph moment. God can give us dreams, not as acts of psychology or supernaturality, but dreams that push us to ask us, are you able to take? To take, not marry as your wife, but to take a hand, to take an invitation to love. Are you able to not be afraid? Are you able to trust the prophet, the dream giver, the neighbor, your pew sitter, your organizer, to know that something better is happening? And are you able to wait for God coming? This is a dark time. If you look at the news, or if you've been laid off, if you've been struggling over and over again, or occurrence of illness or a lack of funds, it might not seem like a great time to trust a wild dream. But I think that's why the signs are all around us, the other Josephs, to remind us that hope is coming. I was inspired a couple days ago when across my phone came the little bit of news That, yeah, after neighbors of ours blew whistles and met ICE on corners, finally something had happened and our neighbor Kilmar was being ordered to be released from ICE custody. With enough woke Josephs, something can start to happen. And Bishop Buddy told me she wanted to experiment. Could we have a revitalization of church in parts of the city that had died, that had gone to sleep to the dream of hope? I thought, well, that's an odd idea. There's closed churches and no money, but something nudged her. Can we wake up together? Can we discover hope together? Can we get beyond the being too afraid to know that there's people around us, to love us, to encourage us to give hope? I think we can discover it together as a diocese. That's what Danye taught me in our Peace March, or where Officer Darius reminded me as he stopped giving parking tickets, that receiving mercy transforms your capacity to extend it. Emmanuel is coming. God with us doesn't just mean people like us. It means God with all of us. Todos. It means God breaking every boundary. God telling empires that they will fall. It means that those who are facing deportation, those who are facing poverty, can look up and take a risk with us. Are you woke enough to say yes to an angel and a dream? Are you able just this one time to be not afraid, to believe that ordinary people can make things happen, to remind one another that love still wins, always wins, even when it seems it's impossible? This is what God is commanding angels to do, maybe to you, maybe to your neighbor. Call again. Encourage one another to take this up, to ask, what do you need to wake up to hope, to release fear? Maybe this week, maybe during Christmas, you will join again with your neighborhood association, with your free DC or mutual aid. Maybe this week, there'll be another miracle at Charlie's Place, or maybe next week. Where are we going to take up the charge? Wake up. Do not be afraid. Joseph had every reason to be more like Ahaz. Scandal is real. You have real things to be afraid of. Consequences matter. And yet, for whatever reason, some folks like Joseph will follow that dream. And I think we do it because we know the impossible has happened before, when Emmanuel came to be God with us, and love and God will happen again. If these days things feel overwhelming and they feel like there are no choices, we can just remember, we don't have to choose like Ahaz, the false security or the trust that crumbles in our hands. There's always Joseph. Take the impossible calling, wake up to love's possibilities, and do not be afraid. We're in a congregation of Josephs, a city of Josephs, even a diocese with a lot of Josephs, showing us the way for generation to generation. May the same Spirit call us to cross boundaries, to build relationships, to keep expressing the love, because somebody needs to hear it. Somebody needs to be reminded that you can love, you can take the hand, and that you can believe Emmanuel is coming, not just to comfort us, but to transform us into agents of the very love that we have received. Thanks be to God, thanks be to those who dream, and thanks be to those who know. Emmanuel, come again. Amen.